After 2 years of pandemic, what's next for the LGBTQ plus business? Tonight we present a very special takeover of Queer News Tonight. All of our anchors on this evening are either business owners, help run businesses or charity organizations, or both, like in my case. Our first story this evening isn't anything you've seen on CNN or Fox. Our first news story this evening is about the individuals around the table with us. This pandemic has devastated many businesses, and each of us here have had our own challenges due to COVID-19. For tonight's first segment, we're going to be discussing what challenges we faced and what we are doing next to help our businesses succeed. And I've been giving some thought to that. I wanted to kind of ask, do you think that there's a difference of the way we're handling and managing or got through the pandemic compared to a non-LGBT? Do you think there's anything to that? And I ask you, Josie, because you have a business right on Wilton Drive, you have a restaurant like I do, and we had some unique, like everyone else in the industry, but we're both still standing.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for that, right? I know that you probably share that sentiment. I can't say that we're facing different challenges, although we are in a world that seems a little bit more discriminatory, and we seem to be taking a step backwards when it comes, to the conversation of who you're supporting and where you're spending your money. But I think that because we've always led what we do, not with our LGBTQ plus flag, on my chest.
But do you think that the LGBT community, because we're so close, especially in Wilton Manors, that we're more likely to support each other than, say, the general population for a given restaurant?
Oh, well, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, I'm very grateful for that. We're part of this wonderful community, LGBTQ rich and predominantly, and I think that everyone stepped out and recognizes what we're all going through because they're going through it. And so it's been really, it's been a community affair for sure.
Carvel, I mean, you've got a small business, probably the smallest of all of us, and it's unique.
It's definitely unique in every aspect, even as far as you guys were talking about. And initially, my business actually materialized because of COVID. And I always tell people, it's like, I use that quote, my business flourish came out of chaos, basically.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But as far as going back to your first question about facing discriminatory, initially we were trying to get PP loans, because I actually started my business prior, 6 months before COVID, actually on paper. So I was actually fortunate to get qualified to get loans. But the thing is, there were discriminatory stuff as far as getting PP loans. And I always tell people, when the COVID started, everybody started wanting to go be outside and get bikes. And then I was actually working at the Trek store at the time before I was still working to get my business started, but everyone wanted bikes. And I think my last month working at Trek recorded their best quarter ever at the end of 2021 and things like that, or actually 2020. And that's why I left. And so it was kind of my experience for the last 2 years has been the opposite.
Right.
So my business has been growing.
And I think we found that with all bike stores in town.
Yeah.
There was a shortage of bikes.
Yeah.
It was Christmas every day once the pandemic started.
Pretty
because it
much,
was a safe place to be able to go out and be in public and socialize. And, for the Smart Ride, we did a virtual that first year. Yeah. And shockingly, without having an organized ride, we still raised a ton of money because people wanted to get out. And this was a way to socialize.
Yes.
And still be outdoors. I'm just curious when it comes to the nonprofit side, you were launching my Hollywood Pride, and the organization was just getting off the ground, because I remember being at those early meetings and stuff. And how did COVID affect you guys?
Well, we obviously had the challenge of having a Pride event early in this year when we were still facing Omicron, and the downtown businesses in Hollywood were really eager to support an event and to have people come out, and especially the LGBTQ community that has never really organized an event in the city of Hollywood. So we had the support of local businesses, and we were also a new venue for their businesses to get exposure to our community. So I think we had overwhelming support from the local businesses, and also bringing people together who may have not been able to congregate. Obviously, living in Wilton Manor, manners. We have a community here. In Hollywood, we don't have a connected community, which was why we founded the council in the first place, was to find members of our community and give them a safe space, events, social programming, so that we can bring people together.
So let me ask you this as a business, because your other world is more banking.
Yes.
And did you see, like, how did that change for you?
Well,
you got two different things going on. One is basically the general population, and the other is more LGBT.
Yeah, I mean, as a certified financial planner during a pandemic, in providing financial advice, it was there wasn't a roadmap to tell clients, well, listen, either the world will come to an end and you won't need any money, or we'll solve the pandemic. And that's the way we had to approach a situation where we really didn't know in the early days. And then obviously with the stock market having such volatility, and then having this huge comeback in the stock market and the economy, and now clients and business owners, as you included, are facing issues around inflation, food prices going up, prices of everything going up, cost of housing
tires.
is really impacting the LGBTQ community probably more than the general population. So there's a lot of financial advice, and we've gone through like this back and forth that's been really difficult for anyone to navigate, including the LGBTQ community.
Buck, just from your perspective, just because I want to get everyone's feeling on this, like, how was this experience for you this last 2 years?
So within the last 2 years, with Unity, we did our Celebrate Orgullo during the pandemic. For the most part, we switched our platform to do virtual events like much of the other nonprofits. But then we did a drive-in that was actually a go-to event where we had a freestyle concert with Lisa, and it actually turned out really great. We were able to still, get donations, and we were able to still apply for grants and funding. But it was nice to actually have an event with people and have some sort of normalcy. As far as the other side, with me working day in and day out, our job closed for 10 weeks. But throughout that time, luckily, being that I do work in one of the largest global luxury conglomerates.
Aren't you fancy?
We were supported, luckily, with resources that, secured my job, and I never really had to worry about money during that time. So I was very fortunate and grateful that, I'm employed by LVMH. But for the most part, ever since we opened back up, business has flourished, and we're doing really, really well.
Any other thoughts on it before we move on? This was a pretty big deal for our community as well as the world. And just from a health standpoint, how did that affect everybody?
Well, I think it's interesting as your businesses, and you both own restaurants, and obviously you're seeing differences in your businesses, is that the pandemic has changed the way we do business.
Yes.
Even, and on the nonprofit side, I attended the drive-in event, and I hope that event happens all the time. I think that was a great idea, and it made us do things differently that we didn't do in the past. So I think there's a lot of great changes. Like, I'm sure your takeout business has, gone off the charts, where you didn't focus on it as much maybe in the past, and doing different types of ways to run your business. I think we've all learned something new.
It made us all
contactless,
pivot,
menus and those things. It
But
saves us money.
But it's interesting in the business, like right now, our biggest problem is still finding, we lost our driver. So 20% of our business is delivery, and we have no delivery driver this week. So the whole week we've had to say, well, come in, we'll give you a free dessert if you pick up your own food, because we can't do deliveries, because we're facing the same problems everyone else is from the labor standpoint in different areas.
Yeah,
right?
There's no mechanics, and I always tell people, I'm like, I live my shop because I'm doing the repairs. I don't have any other mechanics or anything like that. So yeah, it's definitely a storage from even the small mom and pop shops, even to the big box truck stores, where they have record profits, where they got no staff. So it's across the board. But the other thing I want to point out, you mentioned what the pandemic has teach everybody is to pivot. Literally, you gotta think this way because we don't know about tomorrow. So I think that's the ultimate lesson, not only through business but life too. Everyone just had to adapt. It's still adapting,
I think there's another
Yeah.
a really big blessing that came out of it
Yeah.
was, especially in our industry, it may seem like something that hit us a little harder and took our labor costs through the roof, but it was a conversation that obviously you're seeing the result of that conversation fully laid out. And it was, people weren't being taken care of in the service industry.
Yes.
And as a career service industry person, I know there was no insurance plans in place. People were underpaid.
Same in retail, retail, yeah.
And so now we're understanding it created value and even equity for all of the employees, which is also concerning because, people now during the pandemic, they realized that they could do the same thing for the same money sitting at home in their pajamas,
Yeah.
So it's where are my people out who need that, that physical labor? I need you guys.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of